Hello, and welcome to another week of the Story Darks podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are digging into some more $5 words, which is either Latin or faux Latin. I guess it's more Greek.
I think
Pneumophobia.
I think volume 5. I think volume 5 is Greek, and invisibility, I believe, is Latin.
Yeah, that
and then forts, but yeah, volumes 5 and 6, Manifest Destiny, issues 25 through 36. We're now on. As you mentioned last week, we're on the back half of the issues here. So this is the third quarter of the game that is Manifest Destiny, with the fourth quarter coming up here. But yeah, you already mentioned the names up top. So they can't. Well, actually, they didn't go away from that in the last volume. Sasquatch very much was about Sasquatch. But they put in the titles kind of what the core of Discovery is dealing with in this volume. And in volume 5, Nemophobia and Chromophobia, the fear of memories and the fear of time, or I think it's the fear of the passage of time, which I guess is the same thing. I don't know. But in that one, they're attacked by the fog, which is their first kind of. It's their first passive.
Okay. So if you were reading this in single issue and you get that splash page where they look out into the fog and they see all of the things they've defeated so far, would you think we're in the final arc right now? Like this is everything's coming to a head.
Yes,
because I like, even knowing that we're only a little more than halfway through, I'm like, this sure seemed like they were giving themselves an out here if they wanted to wrap.
I thought that exact same thing of, if I didn't know how long the story goes, the idea that there would be some sort of Legion of Doom team up at the end where they have to fight everybody,
But it's a good fake out in that way too, because they weren't actually there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think it helps too, especially as you're reading in a collected format, that everything just builds, that it starts by the first hallucination is the flora infection. So it starts on something that is plausible, that you wouldn't have noticed right away, and that could be there. The next thing is all the monsters we have seen, or versions of the monsters we have seen. It's a little more out there, but still plausible. And then as they go up, and as we see each individual person go through, and you start seeing people we know are dead, at that point it ramps up into, okay, this is some sort of mass hallucination. But that kind of slow buildup of that reveal, I thought was really effective. Even though in that moment, with the flora, you don't know what's going on, and I didn't know what was going on. But when you get to that splash page, the yellow one, the story construction part of my brain says that can't be real.
Yes.
There's something in the back of my mind that is that's not happening now. But yeah, if this were volume 7 or something, and I knew there's only 8 volumes, I might have a different reaction to that page. But knowing where we are in the story, but also I guess the idea too that, and maybe this is also the effect of the fog or the whatever it is here, that the men there, because they're also at their wit's end, they're also at the end of their psychological rope, and then this mass hallucination comes in, which is obviously dampening their senses. Everything's on the table to them. Everything seems possible. Anything they see out there clearly has to be real, which, it takes a little steadier mind to understand, wait, no, I see you, but I know that's not real. But for these men here, because they're stretched so thin and the influence of this fog, they're literally out there chasing ghosts.
Yeah, it's a little Age of Ultron, Scarlet Witch.
A little bit. Yeah,
hallucinations, and takes each character a beat to figure out, wait a second, that's not Heimdall. I'm not in Asgard. I was in a shipyard trying to acquire vibranium.
Yeah, but also it's individualized. Every person sees what they fear. They're not all seeing the same thing. Yeah, which I really liked when Lewis and the French woman whose name I forget, when they go for their fake out, and she appears on top of the burning cabin as the big demon. Yeah, and they cut to various people, and they all say what they see. they're all seeing this thing and they recognize it as a threat in this hallucination, but they're all seeing something different. And I liked how they visualized that this is
Okay,
it's a
but
mass
let's
hallucination, but you said, I'm seeing what I'm seeing and you're seeing what you're seeing. And there's no way I can convince you that
well,
what I'm
but
seeing is
also
right and what you're seeing is wrong.
I'm not sure they're actually hearing each other because they're all hearing words from the phantom that they see. Like
Yeah.
when Sacagawea steps out,
Yeah.
he hears like she gets called Little Rabbit, and so like that could have been
It's true. Yeah.
another person saying
Yeah.
something, but they're all hearing the words from the person that haunt them too.
Yeah.
But that's inconsistent because then later, like during the delivery,
It's a
like they're
yeah.
coaching her through the delivery, but they look like so. I was like, but I think that's one of those things where it's like, it's a wobbly hallucination.
Yeah.
It's
It's
not
intentional. Yeah.
it's
Got
not
to
that
be.
they're
Yeah.
breaking the rules of this thing they created. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, it's because there are no rules, and yeah,
well, the rules
any
are whatever we decided
any
to do is what it
inconsistencies
is.
are any inconsistencies are well, it's just a mass hallucination. You're in the heat of the moment, you don't know what's going on, and maybe you have a slightly more lucid moment where you can hear but not still see. Yeah, it's real flexible, right? That's real bendy on what is and isn't happening there. But again, I thought it was interesting, and I kind of liked at this point in the story that we got this sort of passive aggressor, passive antagonist, doesn't attack them directly. I kind of like that as a bit of a reprieve, I guess. And also again, extending these monsters into larger metaphors in terms of what the explorers are encountering. This is encountering the madness of this journey, of this task, of this expedition at whole. The idea that they're given everything they've seen so far and knowing that they are planting down roots for the winter. The idea that they would be so far stretched psychologically that at this point, this is when the psychological monster hits them. It's again that kind of parallel.
Oh, yes. So I definitely love that. That's what I liked about it. What I felt somewhat disoriented because I felt like we had established like here's the rhythm and flow for how each of these story arcs will go for 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
4 broke it, and I complained about it when they broke it, and it seems they have no intention of returning to it now that they're like off and running, because 5 does not return to that formula. I was like, oh, there's a villain of the week in this, but not really. It's not the same type of thing, and it's about like the internal fractures this causes. Volume 6, like it is an enemy of the week in that there's kind of an enemy within.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And it's like, but this is like, it's no longer the arches exclusively causing afflictions. Now they're just crumbling from the inside out.
Yeah. Well, but again, I think that makes sense on 2 levels. It makes sense in an in-story level because they're not traveling at the moment. Because part of the idea early on was that as they move, they encounter a different arch in a different area that is tied to a different monster, a different creature. The entire point of where we are in these 2 volumes is, again, they're bedding down for the winter, so they're not moving. So how do you? I guess from a story construction standpoint, how do you kind of justify the premise if our group of characters aren't moving through the terrain anymore? If they're not moving through the frontier, where does the conflict come from? And so the idea that first it would be psychological internally for each person and then be external within the group itself, I can see how from a construction standpoint, that makes a lot of sense.
I agree with that.
Yeah. But the second point, I think why it makes sense is what we talked about last week, the idea of getting all those flashbacks to the previous expedition, to Captain Helm, him making it out to the Pacific Ocean and seeing that demon, right? And spending so much time with that. And as we said last week, the idea that was information given to us, the reader, that wasn't paralleled with the journey of Lewis and Clark. So we had stepped out of, at the time, what we thought, stepped out of the knowledge of Lewis and Clark. And now we, the reader, know something that they don't, only to be revealed that Captain Helm made it back to Washington, or he made it back east to Jefferson, and he's locked up in a room. And so we actually have caught up to Lewis and Clark. They know this thing is out there, and it's been revealed that's what their actual mission is. And so we talked about how Dingess and Roberts like showing their hand that early. It can only lead to one of two things. Either it's meaningless, it doesn't affect anything overall in the story, in which case, why do we waste time on it in volume 4? Or it's the most important thing, and they just showed their hand early. So how do they still build to this and not have the reader think, okay, well, they're fighting this thing now, but what about this other big thing over here? Like, we know this thing's coming, so why are we wasting time here? So how are they going to integrate those two things? And I thought it was they did it clever enough here where it's not mentioned at all. While we're having all the members of the expedition are having these hallucinations of various people and all that, and that volume ends with Lewis seeing our ghost Spanish explorer, the same one that appeared to Helm, who appears to be like the herald of this demon or whatnot, and so we see that at the end of a arc where it's all about seeing things that aren't there, except we, the reader, know that this thing is there. So when we move into volume 6 and how we see that this guy is appearing to both Lewis and Clark, trying to pick a winner, and then he ditches both of them and stays with the mutineers, we know that this thing, whatever this entity is, clearly is real in quote unquote real in some way. But we've built up now this being starting from volume 4 to where now it's almost like they can't go back to the original the initial construct, because we know this thing is looming out there, because we have this other information. And as we found out, not only do Lewis and Clark know this, but Sacagawea knows this. And that's what their agreement is. That's why she's so important. That's why her son is so important. And she agreed to all this stuff. And we find that we get that info dump when they bring in the French woman from La Charrette, the one who's been caring for and kind of helping Lewis out. They bring her into their confidence. And it shows that the three of them, Lewis, Clark, and Sacagawea, they know what the real mission is, which is this demon out here and the importance the baby shows. And so now, instead of feeling like Lewis and Clark have caught up to the information that Dingess and Roberts gave to us, the reader, now we understand that we've caught up to the characters. And at least those characters, those core historically relevant characters in Lewis, Clark, and Sacagawea, we know what their deal is and why they're in the story. And now we're all on the same page. The rest of the men still don't know. They are still, for the most part, red shirts. But in terms of our main POV characters, our main characters of interest, we all know what's going on now. And so now any other, what I'll call them, like intermediary monster they're going to face, again, they didn't face one in 5, really. It was this fog, and it was mutineers in volume 6. They haven't faced another monster yet. We got 2 volumes left that we'll get to next week. Whatever they do, whatever they face is now all tinged from the fact that we know that the big bad is out there still. And I think it would have felt reductive if the creative team had gone back just being like, and here's another weird animal they have to fight and figure out how to kill it. Oh, they survived, moving on. That feels to me, that would have felt inconsequential to the story, given what they had already set up, given that they said, we're going to show you the end, as it were.
Yeah.
And watch as how we sprinkle this out and build to it and still find narrative tension. And the internal squabbling, the personal squabbling with the hallucinations and all that, that's a way to still introduce conflict and not betray the idea that what they're facing is ultimately not as big and evil and terrible or as dangerous as the thing we know is out there.
Yeah, I guess what I'm curious about is when they found out like how long they'd be going, because it does seem like in 4 you reveal the big bad as if you're in the penultimate chapter, and in 5 you do the callback to all of the things you've seen so far, which is either like one of two things is happening. Either this is a push to bring in new readers of like, yeah, you get the idea of what happened in the past. If you don't have the first, 15, 20 issues, whatever, we'll catch you up. You can jump in here, or we're getting ready to end. And I don't really think either is true. So I think that's the part that like just kind of made me bump on it. Um, what I like is that in absence of Lewis and Clark providing the crew an explanation, they are not content with no explanation, and so they take the religious explanation that's given to them. Right?
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
like this will fill in the gaps. This makes sense of all of the crazy stuff we're seeing.
Mhm.
So, like, and you've left us no alternative, so we're gonna go with this. What I
Yeah.
found was interesting is that I think there is a split, but nowhere near 50-50 on like sci-fi and fantasy. Like when fantastical things happen, does that prove or disprove like religious metaphysical beliefs type
Yeah.
things? Because I think there's always that hypothetical where someone will ask like a theist, like, okay, well, like if aliens came and landed on Earth tomorrow, like would that shatter everything for you? And I think I want to say for most people that it would be like, yeah, that would kind of disillusion, whatever their notion of whatever
Mhm.
is. Um, and then there are obviously people who are like, well, no, that just proves that there are like things beyond our comprehension out there. Therefore, I'm open to believing anything now, um, which I think is what these guys are. But that, like, honestly, they're genuinely searching for anything that can make sense of the situation they're in.
Yeah. Well,
And
exactly. Yeah. And the
and
only
no one's
answer given.
offering it, and they're not really
Exactly.
allowed to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. They are told that, well, sorry, they're just told. That's it. They're given
Right.
orders, do this, this is why we're here. And they can't reconcile any of that with all the stuff they've seen. They can't come to terms with why they're doing this and why they're, I guess at this point, why they're risking their lives for all this. Like, what's the point if we're going to keep fighting all this stuff? And so, yeah, in that vacuum, in the absence of anything else, someone spouting anything with any sort of direction that isn't what Lewis and Clark are doing, because I mean, it feels like that's just what most of these men are glomming onto, is just an alternative view.
Right.
So, someone out there speaking very loudly and very forcefully and being like, this is what it is, be like, well, that sounds a lot better than what the two captains are saying. So I'm going to go with this. So yeah, no, that sort of thing, given the environment that Dingess and Roberts have created for their story, that makes total sense to me. That people who felt like they were brought into this under false pretense would be searching for some sort of larger meaning
I
to
mean,
keep
many of
going.
them were like coerced. It was like this or
Well, yeah, yeah,
hang, this or
exactly, yeah, yeah,
so, it's not like many, like none of them have families they left behind. Like that was made
yeah,
very clear early on.
yeah,
So you can't be like, oh, I didn't know there was a high chance of harm coming to me
yeah,
when you took me out of jail and, promised me whatever. Uh, by the way, the most interesting character, I assume we would get to this by the end, but the most interesting character to me now is York. Um,
oh yeah,
uh,
oh yeah,
like,
yeah,
like, and that was a nice slow build into, like, it didn't just whip the spotlight onto him. It was slowly panning over to him for a while. Like we'd
hmm,
been getting a little more York, like, when he's quarantined and he has the vision of like his former master or
yeah,
whatever. And like it was a very nice slow burn leading up to him. And then realizing like you put him in a terrible situation by
yeah,
giving him the whip.
yeah,
And he's like, yeah, I would love to do this, but like I can't. And like he doesn't know what to say to him. He's like, he says you're right, and then something else, and then yeah, you're right.
yeah.
Sorry.
I don't know if they were thinking about if Dingus and Robert were thinking about it at the time, if they were trying to make any sort of comment on the idea of like allyship. I'm going to guess they probably weren't. I think they were simply wanting to give York a moment, just give him a
Yeah.
character moment of him being the bigger man and being like, look how stupid you are for what you believe. But what we get in kind of, I would say modernized, slightly more modern than when this book was written. Those issues there were in volume 6 were, what are we in coming out in late 2017, early 2018. So, but still, what we get of Clark is like this thought of like, I know what to do. I'm going to give him, I'm going to give you your moment, and you're going to shine in that. And this is me propping you up and giving you the spotlight and saying, this is your time. This is for you. And York being like, dude, you don't get it. Like,
Right.
being like that, like you don't understand how that doesn't work for me. Insofar that not only does it not work for me, it actively works against me. If I do the thing that you think you've pictured in your mind is the moment, this is the thing you need, the thing you deserve. And he's like, no, I can't do that, And I also do love, as we've talked about a little bit here and there throughout our discussions, how the events portrayed in the book graphed onto the known historical record. And that last confrontation, between York and Clark, of being like, I just want what you promised me, which was that when this is over, I'd be free. And Clark's like, yeah, totally. I said that. Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. Because what is known about York's life is that after the expedition returned, after that 2 years came back, he fully expected that Clark would free him. Like there was an understanding that he would,
right.
And Clark didn't. Because he was like, nah, man, we're back now. Because what has been written about York is that during the time of the expedition, yes, he was the only black man, he was the only enslaved person. But because he had a set of skills that some of the other guys didn't, he was treated effectively like an equal in terms of hunting
right.
and fishing and doing the chores and work and all. He was not treated like, heavy scare quotes, but he was not treated like a slave for those 2 years. And he returns back and was apparently under the expectation that he'd be freed. And Clark was like, nah, man, we're back now. You're property. And like, that's not cool. But to know that that's how it played out in real life, and to see that just that one real hard kind of truth bomb thrown in right at the end of that volume 6, I thought was really cool. And it, to me, it showed that Dingess and Roberts are paying attention to what happened in history.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and probably around the same time as this book, Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote the book Between the World and Me, which is a long form essay to his son. But he wrote it while his son was a kid. And in it, he has this quote, which I thought of as I was reading the York plotline here, where he says, all my life, I'd heard people tell their black boys and black girls to be twice as good, which is to say, except half as much. These words would be spoken with a veneer of religious nobility, as though they evidenced some unspoken quality, some undetected courage, when in fact, all they evidenced was the gun to our head and the hand in our pocket. And, he goes on to say that, it seemed to me that our own rules redoubled the plunder. It struck me that perhaps the defining feature of being drafted into the black race was the inescapable robbery of time, because the moments we spent readying the mask or readying ourselves to accept half as much could not be recovered. And I just thought, like, wow, not being able to extract vengeance, that everyone standing around is like, this guy deserves it, we're giving it to you. And he's like, I can't do that because I have to be twice as good as the rest of you to be equal. I have to put twice as much effort into everything I say, everything I don't say, every action I have to think through, because I have double the consequences, half the reward for everything.
While you're reading it, looks like Ta-Nehisi Coates. Well, I don't know. It looks like that book was published in 2015. So we're just in the tail end of that in terms of the tail of that book being out. But yeah, no, I think that is a great moment that clearly they wanted to set up for York. And again, I love what you said about how they've been sprinkling that in, because he has been in the background, a little bit here and there. We see how we see how Clark trusts him, and how he doesn't trust him, but we do see how he relies on him. We see his utility. We see what he can do. We see how the other men treat him. We see how someone like Sacagawea regards him as well. But yeah, like little by little, and I think putting him in the quarantine shed during volume 5 so he's separated from the rest of the group. I think that really reinforces him being a focal point in volume 6.
Yeah, I mean,
Like, I think
and
I think that was a great story choice for that character, given what they were going to do with him in the next volume.
yeah, totally agree. Um, he he kind of okay. So I will say my biggest problem with the book right now, like where we are in the series, is that things feel a little uneven to me. Um, but I'm not. In fact, I was gonna say I'm not sure. I'm quite certain it's not a flaw of the writing. It's just a matter of like where my interest diverges from what they're focusing on.
Mm.
Um, because certain things I feel like the fog, horror show type thing went on a little too long. Like I felt like, okay, I got the point. Like, yes, there's this stuff. They've been through a lot. They're turning on each other. Like, I get it. You're now you're just kind of basking in the graphic horror element of it all, which is like that's what horror comics are a lot of times, which why I often don't read horror comics. And then you get to other plots like the prior thing, I think could have kept building a while longer, or they could have stayed separate a little longer, or like the coup could have lasted longer. Like that was a really interesting plot to me that I felt wrapped too quickly. So I feel like the things that I'm not as interested in, I'm forced to sit with for twice as long as I want to. And then the things that I find are working feel like they just get a little rushed or cut short. And the prior thing, they were laying pipe for that last volume, I think. Like in four. So it's a 4, 5, and 6. It's a long runway for a very short rebellion.
They've been putting that in there. Was it just 4? Did it start in 3?
It may have been 3. Yeah, that's the problem with doing 2 a week here.
It is, but it really started. It really came into full in 4 because it did kind of mirror what we saw happening with the previous expedition.
Yes,
the notes from Captain Helm. So yeah, it really, and much like that, the seeds of that exhibition started. We got the first journal entries for him in volume 3, comes to the forefront in 4. So yeah, prior may have been 3 and 4, but then 5, and then the spotlight in 6. Right, that is a pretty big build.
And Lewis and Clark had like been overly suspicious of all his religious rambling.
Yes.
From the get-go. Like at first he was just kind of giving general platitudes to everyone, and they were like muttering to each other like, all right, as long as he doesn't do more than that.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, what are you guys afraid of? And it's like, oh, now I see it.
Yeah.
Like when you control people's religious belief, you can make them do anything.
You're right. I mean, because you're right. Early on, when we first saw the character, there were Lewis and Clark both could see signs of potential dissent just through him. Like they could already they could recognize. You're right. They're like, he's harmless right now, but like they understood that sort of rhetoric, that sort of can whip up a certain kind of fervor, which is in their minds detrimental to the success of the expedition. If there's some division, if people are working at cross purposes, that is interesting. I wonder if there is a way. If there would have been a way that plot line, the mutiny plot line, could have started a little more while the fog hallucinations were happening. I don't know. I
would
see
have
what
been
you're
interesting. Yeah,
I see what you're saying though. The idea of like once we understood what was happening with the hallucinations, then now it's just okay. How do they figure out what the cure is going to be? And in that way, weirdly,
and who's going to die?
Weirdly, in that way, it did mirror sort of what you coined as like the Scooby-Doo-esque.
Yes.
Episode structure where here's an obstacle. This is what's happening. Oh my God, how are we going to fix it? Oh wait, here we did it. That sort of thing. So it did still mirror that in a little way. But you're right, that did run on a little long there. And I don't know if I need it to be longer, but I do agree with you that the storyline, the mutiny storyline, that division and all that. I was more interested in that. That seemed more interesting to me, and also with our Spanish explorer Ghost, him kind of bouncing around to various people as he says he's trying to find a survivor. Right. So
Right.
him jumping people to be like, well, no, nope, not you guys. Wrong bet. I'm going to go with Pryor now. Now I'm here at the camp because he's inside the walls. You're outside the walls. And so that idea of, again, that's the building tension that the reader has because we know who this guy, well, we don't know who he is, but we know what he represents.
Yes.
And he represents the big bad demon at the Pacific Ocean. So the idea that they're starting to sprinkle it in now, and so that we know there's something coming, that reveal was not for nothing, that they have some sort of plan. They have some sort of runway laid out for them. The question now is, how effectively do they do that? But it does seem pretty clear now that they at least have intentionality with everything they did. They didn't just throw that out there and be like, well, I'll figure it out later. There is some sort of framework they're going with to get to the end that they, I presume, have in their head already. They already kind of knew what this is going to be. You can't throw that big demon out there and not have an idea what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, that would be really bad.
That's tough. That's tough.
So anyway, like it continues to be a masterful hand, and again, it's not. I want to be very clear. It's not a criticism of the book. Yeah. I'm just noting where my interest diverges from what the book is doing,
which happens all the time in stories. Some of you're reading, you're like, oh, okay, this is the story, but because of how my weird brain works, that little side story over there, like what's happening on that part of the world, and that isn't the point, but because something about that, maybe it was a character that was written or an environment or a setup, you're like, I want to know more about that there, but I know intellectually that is what the story is about.
Yeah, I mean, I have that, like, my favorite show of all time that I rewatch constantly has episodes I skip on a rewatch because it's just like, I would never, and it's kind of a no one picks on my kid brother but me thing. I'm like, don't you dare slander that show.
Yeah,
but I would never watch that episode again.
Because not everyone, you don't have your fastball every time. You're not always ready to go. But I do have one question as we we jump back and forth between these two books covered at the same time. But I was curious how you felt about the various. I was going to call them narrators, but we'll call them journal writers that we got here.
Oh, I did love the handwriting changes.
Yes, really,
really good.
The real subtle thing of the lettering change there, because at first, when you first read what you find out to be Clark, you don't know who's writing it. But if you're paying attention to the lettering, you would see that this is a font we haven't seen before.
Oh, yes, right. It struck me immediately because it was so heavy.
Well, exactly. But it is so different. It does go back to volume 3 when we first see Captain Helm's journal from the previous expedition. It's in that full cursive, right? Which if you're under a certain age, you may not know what some of those letters are. But the idea that it's so clearly distinct that even if you had missed the date written on paper on a panel that it was 3 years before Lewis and Clark, you would know immediately that this is someone different. This is not Lewis writing this journal. And so just from a visual standpoint, something is different. And you're right. When we see Clark writing, it's not only is the lettering different, how kind of thick and clunky it is. He's not writing complete thoughts, complete sentences, Right. Like if you actually read him out loud, he is just like writing notes of like this dumb, don't like writing.
I hate writing. It's like every other line for the first.
It's like caveman speak there. But we also get journal entries from other characters as well, which I thought was really interesting. And the one I find most interesting, of course, is the young French woman, Ingrid. I think her name was. I was curious if as you were reading, I'm assuming you don't speak French or read French fluently.
No, and normally I was going to bring this up too because normally I just open Google Lens but I was like, you know what? Let me just have the experience I would have had in that time in single issue, and then when you get to the end of the trade,
Yeah.
it's all translated back there. But yeah,
Well, because I assumed there would be translations in the back, and I thought about flipping back there just to get a sense of what it is. But then I decided, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to treat this portion like a silent issue.
yeah,
And
that's what I did. And the art
I
carried
thought
me through. I got the gist
I
of
was
it.
like, I thought it worked perfectly that you understood. I think because the way it's shown, which I don't think is a reflection on the character, but I think it's an art. It was a choice by the storytellers that her journal entries that we see are very short, you know, and
Right.
so the idea is we're not reading paragraphs of observation from her. We're getting line by line by line, so it's like one line, one literal line for like one panel. And so you have an understanding of this is probably going to be descriptive, which again, I assume that's intentional because they're not going to expect anyone or everyone have to flip back and or look up the French and all that if they don't speak it. So in that way, it has to function as a silent issue. Again, I thought that worked great because you understood what was being conveyed, her unease, you know, the way that the panels were laid out of maybe her in the background. So the idea that she is being watched, that there are eyes on her, that has to be so mindful of where she goes and what she does, and that level of unease for her, which if you go back in the back and you read the translations, that's exactly what they're saying. You know, doesn't trust the people she's with. They say that he's changed. Now it was fine when he didn't have a leg, but now they give him a prosthetic and he can walk around. He's getting stronger. Does that mean he's going to come after me again? He says he's changed. I don't believe him.
And it
All of
seems
that
like they
anxiety.
gave him the leg just out of boredom. Like they were
No.
sitting around with nothing to do, and it was
Yeah.
like people
Oh,
will do
yeah.
anything when they're bored.
Yeah.
And you know, these idiots whittled him a new leg.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
like I wish they wouldn't have done that.
I think you're absolutely right, though. Had they been on the move, weirdly, that gives them less time to be like, hey, we're going to make you a leg here. But because they've built Fort Mandarin, Mandan, I think it is. No, there's no R there, which is a real fort. That is a place that they stay for the winter. Absolutely true. A few more historical inactions we'll get to later, but they're sitting around now. You know, what are they going to do? They're not having to move. They believe they're not in danger because they haven't seen the arch. The arch that they do find is the invisible one for the fog. So they got time on their hands. Hey, you're hobbling around here. Not only did I make you a new crutch, but I made you a new crutch that works with your new leg. You know, things they didn't have time for, or maybe even the materials for. And so, but you get all of that anxiety from the character just from the way the panels are, the way they do with facial expressions and things like that. I thought that worked really, really well, and I was really impressed by that. Almost to the point that when I saw the translation after I finished the volume, being like, I'm not going to read it. But I figured from a due diligence standpoint, I should read it just to confirm. But I really liked how that worked, not having the translation and finding out that you don't need the translation, that they approach that such a way that you don't have to know what she's saying. You understand the feeling of tension and anxiety that she is writing about without even knowing what the words are.
Yeah, I mean that's hats off to Matthew Roberts there.
Yeah,
'Cause that's where the writer just says like, "You got this. You got this."
Yeah, yeah. You know, you whether it's just panel descriptions or whatnot, and so the way they can do it, it's I love a good silent issue. Again, even though this isn't actually a silent issue, but if you don't know what the words on the page are, it's a silent issue.
It becomes silent. Yeah,
Yeah,
it becomes a silent issue whether you.
Yeah.
So, well, I've had that experience before where I've like flipped through. That happened in the Unwritten. There was like a large section where he was in. I want to say like Lawrence of Arabia or some book where there was just half an issue that was not in English. And it was like, well, do I like look it up so that I know what's going on, or do I stay in the situation the character's in, which is he has no clue what they're saying to him. He has no idea what story he's in, or how to get out or what to do. So I now opt with, if I can have the character's POV, I'll have that. And,
Yeah.
well, Luz probably knows French. I was going to say, if someone else picked up that journal and saw the French there, they're like, well, I can read this journal, but I don't understand any of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're in the same situation as me.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah. But no, I thought that was cool. I like that shift, getting interior thoughts of a number of different characters, and also, I was going to say she's not writing, but we also get a little more in-depth backstory and understanding of Sacagawea and her, and that's more revealed kind of through her hallucination, right? When she
Right.
sees, let's say, mentor, trainer, whatever it was, the we understand, and we get a sense of, from a very young age, she understands that she has to make a sacrifice. Again, we got hints of that. We got hints of that, through her also hallucinations, like her literal fever dream, in the previous volume. But we see there's a little more intensely here, that she has a full understanding of what she's there for, what her purpose is, and what the purpose of her child is. And we do see that child being born. I will note that it is stated that it is November of 1804 now. According to the record, according to Lewis's actual journal, that was when they met Sacagawea and her husband.
And she already had a kid then, right?
No. Their son,
Okay.
Jean Baptiste, was born in February, so only a few months later. And then she had Jean Baptiste with her, kind of the rest of the way. But that happens a few months after they meet. So not only did they greatly move up when they meet and encounter Sacagawea, they have now changed, like, when he was born. And so the reason I thought about that is, so the reason that it stuck out to me, that why would they change this unless they have a reason for it? And my theory now going forward is, the understanding that everyone seems to have is that the sacrifice is her son. This is why she's so kind of distant, why she didn't want to name it and things like that. But that the idea that the baby is going to go to the big demon at the end there. And I wonder if that is going to time up in February of 1805, if that's going to time up with his quote unquote birth in the historical record. If there's some sort of sacrifice rebirth thing going on there in terms of what
was very Marvel's Fantastic Four, like the 2025.
Yeah, it very much is there. Movie. Yeah. But I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to figure out why you would take a known moment of history and shift it for seemingly no reason, other than to do it, right? And so because they've placed this importance on the baby, on the child, that this thing is the reason she's here is because she's pregnant and because this baby has a greater purpose. We've moved the birth up 3 months here. So I like that idea that if there's some sacrifice, because again, Jean Baptiste lives. He lives to he's got a kind of a weird, crazy life. Kind of ends up getting adopted by William Clark afterwards, and all. He lives. We know that there are records of him. We know who this guy is, and so the idea that he would be sacrificed in this book, again, you're bumping up against the limits of reality. So, assuming they're not going to alter history in that way, much like the assumption is that Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea and York and Seaman the dog, they don't die because we know they lived and they're the only named characters. Everyone else in the party is a nobody. They're red shirts. They can die. But because we have those characters here, working on the assumption that they don't alter history so much that they die on the journey at some point, that list includes Jean Baptiste. That list includes her son. And if he's meant to for this greater purpose, then assume he can't actually die. So,
and if he does die, anyone else is fair game, right? That totally blows the whole thing open.
It does. But again, so this is me putting the pieces together. If he dies and there's some sort of rebirth,
Right.
And that rebirth times with the birth date given in the historical record of February 1805. That to me would be very, very interesting. So I was going to say the thing I'm most looking forward to. The thing I'm most looking forward to in the end of the story here, in the next two volumes, is what happens with York and how York is portrayed. That to me is the most interesting thing of the group. Secondarily is how they deal with Sacagawea and Jean Baptiste and through the lens of this demon and what Sacagawea believes her role is in terms of being a fighter, a hunter, a survivor, a sacrifice, all that stuff. That's like the second thing I'm most interested in terms of bumping up with the known historical record.
Well, and how she came to such relative peace with this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing. It's like, it's one thing to demand something of someone. Like, I mean, I think that's the difference between her and Sue Storm, right? Sue Storm, I guess Sue Storm had the demand for the sacrifice just after the baby was born.
Yeah.
But was like, no, we're not doing that. It's like whole world versus my baby. No, I'll take my baby. By the way, I had an awesome conversation with Christopher Priest because we were talking at a con shortly after Fantastic Four came out. And he's like, yeah, I like the movie, but they messed it up. She should have given him the baby. And then the second movie, he comes back and is like, what the hell? like fully grown up, having defeated his way out of whatever bondage she was sold into or whatever. And it almost becomes like a Franklin villain that has to be redeemed. I was like, oh, that is cool, but that's not MCU.
Yeah, well, it's also the story they were setting up because the next Fantastic Four movie is Doomsday, right. So the next story so then Franklin's, but that is a very comic, that is a very, I've written a lot of comics and this is how I would set up the next arc kind of story.
Yes.
Because
I love that at cons. Like, I love that. Like anytime, like Chris Claremont talking about like for 30 minutes, and that's not an exaggeration, as you well know, about what DC did wrong with Crisis on Infinite Earths because they didn't listen to him when like someone was like talking near his office. He's like, oh, you don't want to do that. You want to do this, this, and this, and this. He's like, nobody cares if Supergirl does. It's got to be Supergirl carrying Superman. He's dead and actually dead. And you don't use that Superman ever again. It's like, wow, what a hot take. And this guy's been carrying that around the chamber for like 30, 40 years now.
Wait, Claremont wasn't out with DC when that happened.
I guess he was
in the 80s. Claremont,
someone picked up the phone and called him and was like, we're thinking about doing this. It was something like that.
I could see someone asking him. Yeah, it wouldn't be about.
But I don't know if they were even asking him. I think they just didn't like, isn't this cool? We're going to do this. And like, so. What he was depicting was like, and the cover is going to show Superman singing Supergirl and she's dead. And he was like, for better or worse, like people don't care that much if she dies, but the shock and outrage of, he's like, because then you pull a Superman from another Earth that doesn't quite have the same power set, but is more cerebral and yada, yada, yada. I don't think it was someone looking for feedback. They were looking for affirmation. And he was like, here, let me change your whole company's plan for everything. And they were like, no, we're good. We're like kind of locked in on this. But anyway.
All respect to Mr. Claremont too. That worked out okay for DC.
Yeah, they did just fine. Well, that and they had it with the Flash, right? Like they did basically what he suggested. Like Barry Allen was gone until 2012.
Well, no, 10 years later, Superman dies anyway.
Right.
So so he is both not wrong and wrong at the same time.
But that image, though, we couldn't get everyone to agree on him dying until we saw him with a mullet and a black suit.
Yeah. But like, no, that was him coming back.
Oh, that was right. The black suit.
Well, no, he had the mullet already. He came back in the black suit afterwards, but the mullet he had all through the 90s. Said all respect to Chris Claremont, but yeah, he just talks some stuff sometimes. So.
Oh yeah, but that again, I'm not saying I agree with him. I'm saying that's why I love talking to those guys at shows. Like anytime you can get them wound up on something, I'm like, let's go, let's hear it.
I remember now. The one key difference, though, we talked about Sacagawea and Sue Storm here. The one key difference is that Sacagawea got pregnant specifically for this. It wasn't like, oh, you have something, I'm going to take it. It
Yes.
is, this is my responsibility. My job is have this kid. This kid is a sacrifice. This is what I'm giving up. Like for her, it is the intentionality of the action of whatever reason she got into this or understanding of it. She's in clear eyed. No one is tricking her or misguiding her or anything like that. She's here fully open. I know what I'm doing. This is the choice that I've made because whatever, I believe in this, that, and the other in terms of the greater good or whatnot, or whatever reason she's doing it. She knows what she's doing, what her purpose is, and why she's doing it. And thus, because of that, justifies her being with these men from the East, these white men,
Yeah.
justifies all these actions because this is the end goal. And again, it is the idea that by revealing to the reader her understanding of the situation when Dingess and Roberts did, again, it brings everyone, it goes back to what I said earlier, it brings everyone in line of why would this girl be with these guys killing all these monsters here? Like, what's the point of all that? Just to lead them to the out west? Like, why would she sign up to do that? What are they referring to when they say she's so important? The baby is so important. Knowing that there is this thing at the ocean, this giant demon at this last gate there on the shores of the Pacific, knowing that there's this thing, larger, greater threat out there.
Right. And now it's almost that
now that they
using them as protection to make sure she gets where she needs to go.
Exactly. Yeah. And the understanding is that they are going to do that. They are going to try, and not saying Lewis and Clark know how to protect her, but we can give them some credit that they
made it pretty far.
Well, they keep being like, don't go here, don't go there. We're worried about you. And she's shown she's far more capable than they are in like everything, So, but they have their mission, which is to protect her. And they think she needs more protection than she actually needs. So they're wrong on that end, but they're not wrong in terms of, we're going to guide you out here. This is the thing that we're doing. And we're all three of us, we're in lockstep. You've agreed to this. We've agreed to this. The understanding is we're not going to screw you over. You're not going to screw us over because we got to get to the end, because no matter how we feel about each other, that big thing at the end that we all know is there is going to be waiting for us. So they're using each other. And then that does, for any squabbling or tension that they may have, and clearly like dislike the way Sacagawea is portrayed here. She obviously thinks that Lewis and Clark are imbeciles. That gets washed away, or not washed away, gets covered over by the fact that the inherent trust has to be there, that we're on the same mission. And that thing is for the greater good, of some greater good, right?
Right.
And they've at least agreed on that part. And that's enough to got them this far, and presumably to get them all the way to the ocean. That tenuous level of trust, just because we're agreed on the mission, that's enough for the three of them to put up with each other, for lack of a better phrase.
So I mean, like, the core characters have stayed compelling through all of this. Like, that's never been my complaint here. And now that they're coming back into focus, it seems, as we approach what will be our final episode next week, with volume 7 and 8, like that's the end for us, but also it feels like they are now rounding the corner. We now see where every character is headed and what their goal is. Like, we literally had, we know what Sacagawea is doing now. We know what even a character, but a red shirt like York wants and is doing. And thanks to your, research, on the side, we know you said in real life he made it back but was not freed.
Yes, it was not freed. Yeah, at least not initially. I think there was some dispute. Like he got free. He was freed much later on, but the understanding was his belief was when they got back, he'd be freed. And Clark was like, no,
Seems like a reasonable belief.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Given
Yeah.
the situation.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know. I don't know if the record says anything about whether he was promised that or not, and that's something that Clark reneged on or anything like that. That I'm uncertain of. But it was, but York, at least for whatever reason, had some understanding or belief or thought that he would be freed when they returned. It was like, come do this thing with me, and we make it back. Like your reward will be your freedom. So again, whether or not that was explicitly ever said by Clark before they left for the expedition, that I'm actually uncertain of. If there's evidence of that historical record, I didn't come across it. I didn't do like the deepest dive. I did like a real medium dive. So maybe it's out there, but he was not freed on the way afterwards. That part is known.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. I feel like just the way it's set up, having read stories before, you're not going to be happy the way it ends for him. Like,
yeah,
and it's almost guaranteed his survival, because if it was like, oh, I really was going to free him and he dies, that's like, well, it's kind of bittersweet.
Yeah,
it's going to be a bitter end.
Also, bad look killing the one enslaved character who's an actual historical figure who is known to, it's one of those things of like,
oh yeah, that would be bad too.
Even if you're like, I got this awesome story idea, and you know what? Maybe it is an awesome story idea. Don't do it.
Right. You're not going to get if you wanted to try something like that, you would probably want to try to clear it with the ACLU before you do it.
Or
and
invent someone else.
Say there was exactly what it is. Say there was a second.
There was a second enslaved person there, and him and York bonded, and only one of them made it back, and that's something York carried. There, you're not doing anything to demean or deface the known legacy of the important historical figure in York. So yeah, if you want to do that, go pure fiction, create a new one,
right?
And then explain why no one knows about this. Oh, no one knows about this guy because he died fighting monsters from another world. Like you can do that sort of thing. When you just go with it and you're saying this guy is York, and we know that, and you can look this guy up and you can read about his life. Whatever you think about doing to twisting that story, it's not brave, it's not smart, it's not clever. Like it's none of those things. Right. Whatever you think about doing there, don't. And so I cannot imagine them stepping in it so hard that they would do that. That would be like, that would potentially tank the book for me if they did something like that. Like if York died, like that would tank the book, because to me that's like, no. You guys, you missed the point of your own book. That would be my thing. So I don't foresee that happening, nor would I ever wish that to happen.
Yeah, I'm trying to play devil's advocate and think of a scenario where it's like, yeah, but if they give him this, and this arc, I'm like, nope, I stand by what I said. Like,
yeah, you can't do it. You can't do it.
He must survive.
Yeah.
And he shouldn't, like, this is me saying story-wise, obviously, he shouldn't get his freedom. Like, that's the type of ending.
You know what? That's a good point there. It's not just killing him off. You can't have him come back afterwards and have a markedly better outcome afterwards.
Exactly.
You can't swing the other way too. That's a great point. You can't be like, and look, we fix history. Ta-da!
Yeah.
Like the white men who owned slaves,
really
not that bad afterwards. Yeah, you can't pivot that way either. That's a great point. That's one. You have to play down the middle. You can change all the circumstances about what happened on the trip and all that, what they're doing. But when it comes to the end, I think, you got to play that straight. It's less bad if they go to the super happy ending, still bad, less bad than if they killed them. But it's still not good. Still not good. You got to put that one straight.
Yeah. Well, that's all I've got for this week. If you got anything else,
no,
let it fly. Otherwise, I've already got things that I want to say in the finale, and I've not finished reading yet. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious how much these things will change and take shape the more I see
Yeah.
and learn as we go.
Which is always a great feeling. Always a great feeling when
It is
you're
a great
reading
feeling,
and you're
and
like,
they've
hey,
surprised me,
yeah,
genuinely surprised me multiple times.
yeah.
I don't think of myself as someone who's frequently surprised by plot twists, and I will say at least twice they genuinely got me this in this book.
No, I'm looking forward to get to the end here, and yeah, you wrap it up.
And
Two more.
hopefully we'll talk to Matt Roberts possibly before we record 7 and 8, which would be not before we read it. We'll read it,
Yeah.
talk to him, possibly record that interview, and then record 7 and 8
Yeah.
without trying to drop the knowledge that we learned from our
Yeah,
exclusive interview.
Yeah,
But we do that all the
well,
time. Like that frequently
it is.
happens on the
So,
podcast.
I mean, I think we can say this right now. When you hear this, if you listen to this when it's released, we'll be seeing Matthew Roberts shortly after that. And the hope is to try to record an interview with him. If we can't do that, we would then try to schedule a recording after we've talked to him, met to him. In which case, then that recording, that recorded interview may come after we have our discussion of volume 7 and 8. But if we can get it done at the con, at the show, then yeah, that'll happen before we record. So it could go either way. Regardless, we're hopeful we can make the time and find a way to talk to him, because I think you and I both have just a ton of questions and things we'd like to pick his brain about, both I think on the specific end and someone like the larger 30,000 foot view of this book. So hopefully we can make it happen.
Yeah, I'll say the wildest thing that I saw in the credits of, I think it was volume 6, was okay, yes. So this is volume 6, so you have to adjust the volume pages to individual issues. It says Matthew Roberts, penciler, all of them, inker, pages 90, 104, 106, 118. And part of me was like, should I go look at those pages and see if I can see, like, was there anything special about them where he was like, I really want to be the one to finish this one? Or was it just like he did the ones he had time for and he just handed the rest off?
I would say 90% of the time, maybe more than 90% of the time that happens is because those pages have something specific on them. In terms of, a lot of times, maybe, if you jump around a story and you're seeing different things or different styles, those are the ones that the main artist will draw or draw color or draw color ink, whatever it is. It's possible that it was just those are the ones he had time to do. Totally possible. I would say most of the times that is an aesthetic choice, that like, I'm going to do these here and we're going to bring in someone different for these other issues here. Or these other pages here. We're going to bring in the person we've worked with, we've collaborated with already, just to give a little different flavor on these pages. I would say that's the majority of the time when I've seen that sort of specific split in the credits page.
Yeah. I think it's just one of those things that I always find interesting because I see that before I read it.
Yeah,
so then
course.
I'm just like kind of flipping through, like, is this the one that
exactly.
Do I see a difference on this one? Yeah.
Do I see a difference? And if I do, why do I see a difference? Is it just because the guy ran out of time?
One?
Yeah,
well,
yeah. So,
and
or is it because there's a story reason? Is there a narrative reason why they did this? Or is it just because, hey man, deadlines are hard, it could be one or the other there. So, I'm with you. Anytime you see that, you're a little on the lookout, like, oh, someone else colored this issue. So when I get to, about 3/4 of the way through, why would this issue be colored differently? Is it a narrative reason why? Are they trying to say something in the art, with the art, that they can't just say on the page? Or it could be, hey, maybe he was sick that month, and it's like, oh, maybe. I mean,
it could be anything where you get called.
His
for
wife had a kid, and he didn't have enough time.
Or,
yeah. So they're all
you
sorts.
have to sacrifice your kid at the Pacific Ocean.
You never know.
So you never know what the reason could be.
There are all sorts of either metatextual reasons or textual ones. So you never know. But again, things we're hopeful maybe we can pick Matthew Roberts' brain on either at the show or afterwards in an interview.
Great. We will see you here next week for the rest of the series. Super excited to see how this ends. we will be genuinely as surprised as anyone with how this ends. And looking forward to it. It's been a great read.
It's been a fun read.
It's been out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
In a very, very good way. And art continues to knock my socks off. The writing, like we've hinted at before, the setup payoff game is masterfully done, like you would expect from someone who's a veteran in TV.
It's the TV brain translated very, very well on page. Yeah, I've seen, as you mentioned early on, like it's rare for me, and this isn't a brag, but it is rare for me for us to cover a book that I haven't read before. For one that's absolutely brand new to me. Because it just shows there's always still cool stuff out there to find. And this is a book that I'm really glad we've been diving into. And can't wait to see what happens at the end.
All right. Well, we will see you here same time next week. Find us storiedarcs.com, intermittently on Blue Sky and Instagram when I remember to do a batch of posts. I keep wanting to make references to the intern that we need to fire, but it's me. So anyway, find us all those places, and be sure to check out our exclusive interview from Lexington when that comes out. I think it's worth, even if you were not tracking 100% with this series, I always feel like, first of all, at this point, if you've followed with this through 5 and 6, you have to finish now. That's holding in a sneeze not to finish. But then you really earn that time with the creator, because I think most of our conversation will be about this book, not his other work. I'll throw in a question here or there, but
in general, though, anytime you can listen to a creative talk, if you're interested in this stuff, you're interested in comics and how they work and how they're made, I think all the talks we've had, they're so illuminating. Yes, we ask specific questions about the book that we just covered, but we also always get so much great insight just on the process, on how this stuff is done, like how it's actually made, what the actual work is, and what the thought process is, and it deepens your well of knowledge about the industry and about the medium. So all that stuff I think is always a great listen to whenever we get a chance to talk to someone.
Awesome. See you next week, and thanks for listening.
Peace.